Some good news over the weekend for the football program. Jaleel Skinner is a Card. On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're discussing Louisville adding a very talented transfer to the tight ends room, discussing what Skinner brings to the table to this team next year and beyond. So with that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's Jase medical.com. As I mentioned, I want to thank you all, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Some good news for the Louisville football program over the weekend. It seems like that has become a recurring sentiment, that there has been a lot of good news over the past month. Some more good news over the weekend. Miami tight end transfer Jaleel Skinner announced his commitment to Jeff Brohm and the program. We'll talk about what this means for 2024 and beyond. We'll also talk about why the Cardinals need to prioritize recent Washington decommit and 2024 edge rusher Noah Carter. If you follow the Cardinals recruiting, this is a name that you should be familiar with. And then to conclude the show, we will dive into another Monday mailbag segment. So, it seems like we continue to get portal news. Now, I'm not naive enough to know that the news is eventually going to slow down, and it obviously has, but not before Miami tight end Jaleel Skinner made an announcement to – sorry, I've kind of got the hiccups. What I was saying – the good news continued over the weekend. Miami transfer Jaleel Skinner committed to the Cardinals program, spent 2 years with the Hurricanes. Didn't see a lot of meaningful snaps for Mario Cristobal's team as a true freshman. Had a decent year, not great, but not all the way bad for a true freshman. 9 catches, 129 yards, and 1 touchdown. But in 2023, only had a catch for 9 yards. So, it seems like everything points to him being passed up on the depth chart for the Hurricanes and not really ever able to crack into that rotation and get meaningful snaps. He enters the portal and commits to Jeff Brohm's Louisville Cardinals. Now, I was wondering, when Ball State tight end Tanner Koziel decommitted from Louisville and decided to stay with his current school, I wondered if the Cardinals were just going to say, yeah, we have enough in terms of numbers at the tight end position, or if they wanted to essentially go out and replace Koziel. And it seems like now we have our answer. Skinner doesn't have the collegiate production that Koziel has through his early college career. But one thing is for certain is that Skinner is a very talented player, of 100% elite tight end prospect coming out of high school. In the 2022 class, he was ranked as the 100th best player in the class, according to 24/7 Sports, 4th best tight end, 15th best player in the state of Florida. From Bradenton, Florida, played at IMG Academy. He was originally committed to Alabama until he had a signing day flip, or maybe not on signing day, but in that early signing period, where he flipped to Miami and signed with Mario Cristobal's Hurricanes, but wasn't really able to see the field in consistent capacity. And for the Cardinals, this is a matter of trusting your scouting, trusting the coaching staff here to bring in the players that they feel are going to be able to help this program, etc. Because it's obvious that Skinner has the talent. It's a matter of being able to put that together for him to have a solid college career. I want to read you a couple excerpts. I want to read you number one of what Andrew Ivins said, director of scouting, back in 2021 because he projected him as a second to third round player, compared him to Jared Cook, who formerly played for the New Orleans Saints, my Los Angeles Chargers, etc. I'll try to keep this quick. I know it's a pretty long excerpt. He goes on to say a legit 6'5" with a slender build, wingspan stretches well over 80 inches, one of the more unique skill players in the class of 2022, given lengthy frame, has spent majority of prep career split out wide as a jumbo wide receiver, viewed by most college staffs, however, as a flex tight end at the next level. Extraordinary catch radius, uses long stride to work his way down the field, takes advantage of soft coverage on a consistent basis. Will obviously need to bulk up as he was under 225 pounds the spring before his senior season. Also needs to get better at attacking the ball in the air and could get more fluid with his movement patterns. Entry-level blocker at this stage in his development, which is almost expected for someone on the leaner side. Skinner on ESPN listed as 6'5", 210 pounds. So that's where you start to wonder, is he going to project more of a jumbo wide receiver, or is he a traditional tight end, a flex tight end that is mainly used in receiving packages? Now, it says on ESPN that he's from Greer, South Carolina. That would make sense. IMG is in Bradenton, so birthplace Greer, South Carolina, but lived in Bradenton while he was at IMG. I want to read to you two things that I reached out to two people that I trust. Alex Dono of Locked On Canes, fantastic host. Shout out to him for reaching 14,000 YouTube subscribers on Monday. I want to read to you what he said about Jaleel. He says this: Skinner is long with a lot of talent. He's really a jumbo wide receiver listed as a tight end. He hasn't developed enough as a blocker. And then he just goes on to reiterate that he is a former four-star player out of high school. Bama wanted him in the class of 2022. Also got some commentary from Brian Smith, Locked On's national recruiting analyst, who has ties to the Florida area, does work for Miami and Florida State sites. He essentially says this simply: elite athlete that has a world of upside. Skinner is a prototypical flex tight end. So it seems like we are sort of coming back to the same question, and that is, what is Jeff Brohm going to use Skinner as in this Louisville offense? Is he going to be used more of as a flex tight end, a jumbo wide receiver? Could Brohm be sitting here thinking, okay, I've got Mark Redmond, I've got Nate Kariski, I've got some other players in this rotation, Dylan Mesman, potentially Jamari Johnson. I've got some players that I can trust to block pretty well. And I've utilized multiple tight end offensive packages as I've been a play caller at the collegiate level. And if I have a player like Redmond or Kariski that's very solid at blocking, or if you trust Dylan Mesman, a true freshman, or Jamari Johnson, who had a very solid bowl game, to be solid blocking, and then you have Jaleel Skinner and Isaiah Cummings being used more so in the flex tight end spot in a H-back role, sort of like a Marshawn Ford was utilized in the Satterfield era, or maybe he's utilized as a jumbo wide receiver, thinking that, you know what, his skill set is more suited to play out wide. We'll construct a scheme that can put him into a position to succeed. So I think that these are the questions to answer. But honestly, I like this move for Brohm. People will say, well, why did you need to add in? First of all, he has 3 more years of eligibility. And if Brohm feels like he can transform Skinner into an every down tight end that is solid at blocking, to where he adds on some strength and adds on some weight, to where, you know, he's better at blocking, to where he's not just a flex tight end, or even maybe if he is a flex tight end, I think that there's a ton of possibility. But the film is incredible. Granted, it is a film from high school, but as Andrew mentioned just a little while ago, the catch radius is extraordinary. Just has a ton of athleticism and ability to high point the football. And for a player who's 6'5" and 210 pounds, and has the athleticism for that size. I do wonder what the transformation into this offense is going to look like for Jaleel, and whether he's going to be more of a tight end, maybe a hybrid, a flex tight end, or strictly a wide receiver. I think that there's a ton of opportunity. And this is a addition that I don't mind, because at the end of the day, you have done a really good job of addressing the needs in the transfer portal. You've added Mark Redmond, who's going to be a potential all-conference tight end. You've added Isaiah Cummings, that has a ton of potential as well, even though the collegiate statistics don't necessarily back it up. You have Nate Kariski. You have Jamari Johnson. You have Dylan Mesman. All guys with potential. I don't mind taking a player that is sort of in a hybrid role and being able to put him into situations to succeed. And you obviously have the time to do so, because tight end is not a specific need at the moment. So I like this move, and I'm very interested to see what his role is going to be moving forward. So we will obviously keep an eye on that development. However, I know that the Cardinals are over the scholarship limit currently, but I don't think that the team is done adding players. I think we're going to see more players enter the portal closer to spring practice. I think with there still being a need at the edge rusher spot, that prioritizing 2024 edge rusher Noah Carter makes a ton of sense. And this name should be familiar to you if you closely follow Cardinals recruiting. And we'll tell you why it should be familiar here momentarily after we talk about our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs is starting, or pretty much has started this week. And it's still time, or there is still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet. Same game parlays. The new Explore tab shows you popular bets. The Parlay Hub is the best way to find popular parlays, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. Hey, Louisville fans, thanks again for making the show your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Right before the break, I introduced a name, or truthfully reintroduced a name, that Cardinal fans, if you follow Louisville recruiting, it should be a name that you at least remember, because the Cardinals were in contention to get a commitment from 2024 edge rusher Noah Carter, and even visited the Cardinals program before he ultimately committed to Washington after visiting the Huskies program. So I think that, when you look at the timeline, Louisville was right in the mix. He officially visited the program on June 16th this past summer. The next weekend, he visited Washington, and he committed just a couple days later. He even signed with the Huskies in December in the early signing period, but with the coaching, with the weird coaching trend that's going on right now, it's like a slippery slope, a snowball effect, to where Nick Saban retired and Kalen DeBoer at Washington took the spot of Saban. Jed Fish took the spot of DeBoer, went from Arizona to Washington. It's just a trickle-down effect. But Carter, it was announced a couple days ago that he would be requesting a release from his national letter of intent, and by all signs will be granted that release, and opening up his recruitment once again. Whether or not the Cardinals will get involved, that is to be determined. But if they do get involved, I really, truly think that they should be prioritizing Carter. Number one, because of how good of a player he is. And number two is because I think that he fills a role that the Cardinals need, and that is a rotational edge rusher in 2024. Carter, I think it's really worth mentioning, when Louisville was recruiting him, he was just around the top 500, according to 24/7 Sports. Now you look at his stock, and he absolutely rose up the recruiting rankings. He's still just inside of the top 300, according to the composite, but 24/7 Sports has him ranked as the 96th best player in the class, 8th best edge rusher, 2nd best player in the state of Arizona. So the 6'3.5" edge rusher from Peoria had a very solid senior season. And I think that ultimately he's going to be a very, very good college player. Blair Angelo, Mountain Region recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports, had this to say about him back in October. Uber athletic edge rusher with two-way production, multifaceted defender with ability to move well laterally, shows terrific bend and explosiveness in pursuit, thrives in the stand-up role where he can cross over blockers. For me, this was the main benefit. Blair mentions uses his quickness to the outside to put immediate pressure on offensive tackles, displays the ability to get slip through creases to keep charging forward. A long strider with fluid movements who can cover a ton of ground, considerable room to fill out physically and add strength. Could continue to refine his pass rush technique, particularly with his hand usage, a high upside prospect with potential to immediately impact at the elite Power 5 level and draw day 2 NFL draft buzz. So a ton of potential here. Main thing is that he's going to have to add weight and strength, only being 218 pounds. But like Blair says, I think that won't deter him from potentially making an impact right away. And I think that the Cardinals have the opportunity to do so. I don't think that they need a true starting level edge guy, although you can make the case that Mason Reiger is better as a rotational edge rusher, which I'm not necessarily sure if that's the case, but I would expect guys like Adonijah Green and potentially TJ Capers, depending on what role Brohm has set for him, could be filling that other role. I think that Louisville needs depth at the spot because there's been multiple players that have entered the portal. Stephen Herron is likely off to the NFL. I haven't really heard anything about Herron. I think that he's off to the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. But outside of Ashton Gelati, you have Mason Reiger. I think Adonijah Green is going to be in line for some solid snaps. You have some interior defensive linemen that can play on the outside as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in spring practice, etc. But I think that Noah Carter, with his talent, top 100 player, I think that it's worth prioritizing a possible commitment from a very talented edge rusher. Noah, he is very, very talented. You see the athleticism, you look at the film, and the explosiveness is there, the speed is there. Maybe, like Blair said, there is some improvement needed with technique, but the burst, the twitch off the edge is something that I feel like could be directly projectable at the Power 5 level immediately. And something else that we can't overlook is that Ashton Gelati's here for one more year. Mason Reiger, this could be his last year. He could end up going to the NFL. And if he doesn't, he would only essentially have 1 year left, I believe. So going ahead and reloading that room and having a player like Carter rise into the starting role in year 2 or year 3 would be a best case scenario. It reminds me, I see a lot of parallels when they got Ashton Gelati. Now, Gelati wasn't as highly ranked as Carter, but he was a guy that utilized a ton of speed at the high school level, but needed to add weight, and he did that essentially in one off season and got to a solid playing level and showed some potential as a freshman. He wasn't a star as a freshman, but he was a key rotational piece. And then by year 2, year 3, rose into the star spot. And I think that could be a possible same level trajectory that we could see Noah Carter take. Like I said, I'm not sure if the Cardinals are going to prioritize Carter. I think that with previous interest shown, maybe it's worth going down that road again and recruiting Carter, because you were obviously right there in the mix when he committed to Washington back in June. Now, will he want to stay on the West Coast? Will he give Washington a chance? Does he follow Caden DeBoer to Alabama? Who knows? He could probably have his pick of almost any school in America. So it'll be interesting to see. I would like to see the Cardinals prioritize Carter, even though the spots aren't there right now. I think that Louisville will still be adding more players as the offseason goes along, and I think that Carter could fill a role both in 2024 and in the long term. So to conclude the show, we will dive into a weekly mailbag segment, a Monday mailbag, if you will. We'll do that here. We'll answer questions momentarily after we talk about our title sponsor of the show, Jase Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we talk just for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. It's scary, but the Jase case is going to be key. It's a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be more prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use the code LOCKEDON to get $20 off of your order. Okay, final segment of the show dedicated to another weekly mailbag on this fine, very cold Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. A couple of solid questions to discuss. First one is a new submission right after yesterday's episode discussing the basketball team. The question is, you talked about what needs to improve. What do you feel like is the reason behind the offensive woes? I think that that's a good question, and I think that my answer isn't really all that simple because I don't think that there's one true answer. But if I had to point at it, I think it's still the I think that it is the offensive game plan, or maybe lack thereof. I still don't feel like there is a true identity on offense for this team, or if there is one, I have not really been able to determine it in the past 18 months. I really haven't been able to look at this team and say, okay, this is what they are really good at doing. This is what they're trying to do, and this is the team that they're trying to be. It looks like, there's a good amount of isolation basketball being played. Granted, the team has been, making better efforts at making the extra pass and going the distance to get the better shots. Now, assist to turnover ratio, it's still pretty not good. Let's be completely honest. But I think that ultimately it's about finding what your identity is on offense. Are you a team that plays more high-low? Do you get the ball in the paint and facilitate outward? You really don't have the consistent three-point shooting to be a three-point shooting team on a nightly basis. I think ultimately if you made me identify what type of a team Louisville is offensively, I would tell you that they like to get downhill and get toward the basket, drive and kick out to find the open shot and be able to penetrate the defense. But ultimately, I struggle to see what this team is trying to do on offense, and that's not necessarily a good problem to have on January 15th. So to make a long story short, that is my offensive that is my one explanation for the lackluster offense, but I don't think that the offense is as big of a problem as the defense. So, okay, moving right along. What are the chances that Tyler Shuck is not the starting quarterback in 2024? I mean, I think that all things considered, I think that he is. All signs are pointing to him being the starting quarterback in 2024. Could he lose that potential role in the spring and the summer? Yeah, possibly. I mean, that's why you have competition. That's why you have practices. That's why you have fall camp. That's why you have the offseason. But I'm not necessarily sure that that's going to happen. If it does, I mean, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world. But mainly, I think for me, is that Shuck has to stay healthy. So if he loses his spot because he gets injured and somebody takes the spot, that's different. But if he's completely healthy and he loses out the starting role, well, that is a very interesting situation. But I don't necessarily think that that's going to happen. I think he's going to be QB1 for the Cardinals in their opening game against Austin Peay next August. So continuing right on along, where does this women's basketball team stand with the previous title contenders of the past decade? I mean, the Cardinals have been right there in the top group or on the outside looking in, seemingly for almost the entirety of the decade, maybe not early on, 2015, 16, 17 weren't the greatest years, but 2018, they were very, very good. 2018, if you're going to say that was the best Louisville team of the decade, which I would agree, 2019 was obviously very good as well. 2020, 2021, 2022, very, very good teams. I think that it's probably, if you're breaking it up into two tiers from possible, number 1 seed, 2 seed to, 3 to 6 seed or 3 to 5 seed that could throw a wrench in teams' plans. I think you're probably in the second group as of right now. And I think that could change if you have some more season defining wins. Right now at 15-2, you're at number 13 in the country, which I think bracketology wise, you're probably just on the outside looking in of a top 4 seed, if I'm not mistaken. I'm actually looking at Charlie Cream's bracketology from the 12th, and they're projected as a 4 seed in the UCLA region. So I think that right now that's pretty fair to suggest, but with a solid ACC slate, they could play them into that first group that we talked about. But I think right now they're on the outside looking in, but that doesn't really mean much. Jeff Walz's team are very, very good in the months of March and, well, hopefully April coming up. So another basketball question. Brandon Huntley Hatfield seems to be turning the corner. Is he turning into the Cardinals' best player? That is a very good question. I think he has been the Cardinals' best player over the past 10 games or so. Very, very solid, averaging 10 and pretty much 9 rebounds a game. So he's taking that next step forward. I think that he just has to be more consistent. Against Virginia, he had 9 points. Pittsburgh, he had 3, and then he bounced back 22 points, 9 rebounds against Miami, 13 and 10 against NC State. He had 20 against Arkansas State, 20 against Pepperdine, 16 against UK. But I think it probably is going back and forth between him and Mike James at this point. And also, don't sleep on Curtis Williams. Scored in double figures in 6 of the last 7 games for the Cardinals. So that's something to focus on. But I think probably Brandon and Mike are 1A, 1B. So final question of the mailbag. When is the next men's basketball win coming? Isn't that the $1 million question? I definitely wouldn't have guessed Miami in early January. So perhaps my opinion doesn't mean anything. But 2 tough road games at North Carolina, at Wake Forest, Duke, Virginia, Clemson's going to be tough. Man, this is a tough one here because you could go a couple different ways. But, man, I don't know. I'm looking at the schedule beginning in February is when I think you're going to have a great chance. You have Florida State, you have Syracuse, you have – I'm going to say Georgia Tech is going to be the next win. That is Saturday, February 10th. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games away. Now, that's to say, Louisville's not going to win one of the next 7. They might, but they're not probably going to be favored in any of those games. So I think it's probably a toss-up maybe with Florida State. Winning at Syracuse could be possible as well, but I'm going to go – my prediction is going to be Georgia Tech. So that's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. Stay warm, stay safe. We'll see you right back here